So it's more of a negation. You're not affirming anything. You're just negating something that seems to be so. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The direction is really important, because if you look for non-duality, you're never going to find it. Yeah. But if you study duality, you'll find out what is non-dual, if you want to call it that. So it's like a movement. Everything is a movement in a way, or a misdirection. So selfing misdirects your attention and interest. Yeah. Misdirects it. And then in non-duality is just really like a disclaimer. A lot of people want to call it the one, but it doesn't say anything about one. It just says not two. Yeah. And then in the AA world, for me, I'll try to frame it first that way, because that's where I come from, is AA. And I got introduced to this idea, this non-duality idea, about my 9th year or 8th year of sobriety. And when I was young, there was a period, when they talk about in AA, there's the heavy drinker, there's the alcoholic and stuff. I had always thought I'd been an alcoholic since I was young, but in fact, I really wasn't, because when I was about 20 years old, I had gotten into a lot of trouble since I was 13. And when I was 20 years old, I was introduced to a spiritual teacher from India, a guy named Guru Maharaji, who was like 12 years old or something. He came out of a family of gurus, like a franchise. They were passing the franchise to the youngest kid, in a way. And so I got introduced to him under the pretense of learning a form of meditation called knowledge. So I got initiated to this meditation, and then the guru came later. And so from 20 to 24, I may have had like 3 Heinekens, and I did no cocaine or anything. So at that point, wanting to know God was a sufficient enough reason to stop using and drinking. So I would probably say I was actually a heavy user. But then after I got disillusioned by that, I crossed the line. And then there was nothing that was going to be a sufficient enough reason to stop me from drinking and using, because I had lost any sense of volition at that point. Yeah. So my feeling of what it was like to be an alcoholic and an addict is more like a parasitical takeover or possession. And when in my 9th year, I used to lead 4th-step workshops in San Francisco and a lot of other places. But since I was 3 years sober, I've been leading these talks every Monday night if I was in the country. And I always, you always focus on chapter how it works. It's all about that. And something had happened to me like about a few weeks before, and then I went back to that chapter and I was reading it, and I came upon this sentence right before you're going into the inventory process. And if you're not in recovery, part of the main aspect of the 12 steps of recovery, it's not about not drinking, it's recovery, actually recovery from the predilections that cause you to want to escape. Yeah. So the recovery, the main principle is the 3rd step, but what initiates the 3rd step is the action steps 4 through 9. So the 4th step's an inventory. So we look at what most people would call our resentments, fears, and harms done to others. I don't see it that way anymore, but at that point, it's usually presented that way. You're going to look at my resentments, my fears, my harming other people, in the pursuit of what I want, looking at our sexual behavior. Yeah. And that's how I was taught the inventory, was you're going to look at your stuff. Yeah. But I don't see it that way. And this is what happened. So I saw this statement. It says being convinced, which is like a present tense verb. Yeah. It isn't like I was convinced or I'm going to be convinced. It's being convinced right now that self, manifested in various ways, is what has defeated us. So that's like the precursor or the requirement that's necessary. You need to be convinced of that from what? From reviewing your own experience. Yeah? It's not like a big leap. I mean, you've been led by self or self-will, and you've seen what it's done in your life and in other people's lives. So it says being convinced that self, manifested in various ways, is what has defeated us. So I saw it so beautifully, and it's never changed since that day. I saw self as a foreign installment or some kind of parasitical movement, something, a foreign something. Yeah, not me. That's all that was really important. It didn't matter what it was, but what mattered was it wasn't me. Yeah, that was the key. And then it says, being convinced that self has defeated us, we're the us, so to speak. And then there's this one, or this, let's say, this modality, or some other, like a mental virus, whatever you want to call it, to picture it as something other than you, has defeated all of us. Yeah, which blew my mind, really, literally. I said, Jesus Christ. And then you can see, let's say in my society, in our society, you take 1,000 people who are all different ethnicities, different intelligences, different colors of skin, everything like that. But so many of us end up parking in the same 3 parking spaces, institution, jails, and death. You get, after a while, you realize there's one driver of all the vehicles, yeah? And it has an intention that overrides the vehicle intention. So, and how it gets away with it is through the self-centeredness, because we're so obsessed with ourselves, we can't see anything as pertaining to anything other than us. So we have to see that we're doing it all, when it's being done through us, and yet we end up having to hold the bag, you know? We actually are where the consequences land. We, us. So being convinced that self, manifested in various ways, is what has defeated us. We will now, so first you got to be convinced of that, you know? Believe with certainty. That's what convincement means. So you're in right now a belief with certainty that self is what has defeated you. That's it. Then it goes, okay, if that's the situation, we will now look at self's common manifestations. Not our common manifestations, self's manifestations. And it goes, the next paragraph, it starts with the word resentment. So if you follow what's being presented, he's talking of resentment as an expression or a manifestation of self, not yours. It's not your resentment. It only is held as your resentment when you're in the act of being identified as self. And that, to me, is the root of the problem in AA. It's an activity. If you are beholden or identified with the mental processes, anytime attention and interest goes into the mental processes, let's call them the thought system, the perceptual interpretation, the memories, yes? Those are mental processes. Anytime we, or what we are, which is attention and interest, go in there, they are always in the act of being identified as a self. So in all your memories, the memories are in the act of being identified as a self. In memories, you're pictured as a body. That's how you can be remembered, yeah? You can't remember spirit. I mean, really. Well, there's my spirit in Hawaii 3 years ago. Where? How can you, draw lines and say which is your spirit, which is spirit, yeah? So the memory and the thought systems, just investigate yourself. I mean, that's the best way. The thought system, thinks of you as a body. I mean, it's obvious. When you're thought about as a body, yeah? And the perceptions see things. You don't see no thing. You don't see spirit. This is what used to flip me out when I was a kid. I went to Catholic school, and I had, we had catechism, and they'd always talk about the 3 qualities of God, which is it's omnipresent, which means it's at all times, whatever. It's omniscient, it knows everything, and it's omni-whatever, something else, And I would be amazed. I say, well, if God is everywhere, why aren't I bumping into it, I couldn't see how I was missing God. I ran into people I didn't want to see quite a lot. How can I not, rub shoulders with God? Because this is amazing. If you see it, just see what you're not. And that's the finding out of what you are. Instead of looking for what you are from what you're not, which is not going to go anywhere. Has it gone anywhere? No, it's not going to go anywhere. That misdirection causes what you are to be seen as a goal that what you're not wants to arrive at. It's never going to happen. You are actually being what you are right now, even though you don't think so. Yeah? So when I saw, so then I looked at resentments and I saw, wait a minute, everyone I know, my own sponsor, when they led me through the fourth step, they said, all right, you're going to write down your resentments, your fears, and your acting out sexually. And I said, but if you read this couple of sentences, they're not my resentments. They're self's manifestation in my life. So a resentment is seen not by me, but through self. I am looking through self, and therefore I see threats where there aren't any threats. Yeah? Or, and then just like that word resent means to refeel, basically everything is re. We're re-seeing, we're re-feeling, we're rehashing. It's all re. It's just a giant do-over all the time. So I got to see that which defeated me as not me. Yeah. And then suddenly, a possibility that hadn't been available to me until that moment became available, which was because there was a requirement for the possibility to become available. I had to see what was defeating me as other than me to entertain the possibility of being free from it. And then as soon as that happened, I realized most of my life I was trying to be free as a self. Because I was constantly, even when I wasn't, the story of me assumed that I was, always in the act of being identified as a self. Yeah. So I saw that it is an obsession with self. That's not the root of the problem. That's what the mental state does to reinforce the identification as self. It obsesses over the idea of you so that you will get bound to that idea. And then when I saw, and it says in the book, you got to get to the exact nature of the wrong. And humbly, my sense is the exact nature of the wrong is an activity called identification as self. That's what I believe is the exact nature of it. And when I saw it that way, I started to get long-lasting effects. Yeah, and I use a term called traveling lighter, because that's basically what's happened. It didn't change the geography of this action figure. I'm going to get ill or this or that, but I've been allowed to travel lighter through whatever life has in store for me as this for years now. So basically, the solution verifies itself because there's relief from the problem. Not for the problem, but from the problem. Yeah? And you can't, like it says in AA, it's one of the coolest, greatest spiritual statements in all spirituality, self can't get out of self. I don't understand. It should be like on the book, big book, on the binder, like warnings on cigarette packages. They should have it on all the big book information, all the AM. Self can't get out of self, because most of the time that's exactly what's happening. We're identified as that sense of self, and we want to get out of it, but we want to be there to get out of it. Yeah, we want to get out of self as a self. And it's not going to happen. So how can you get out of self? Well, if you go prior to self and realize you've never been in self, you now have the experience of being out of self, but it also has the possibility of stabilizing, because it wasn't an experience. It's a state, just like AA does to us. You can go to a lot of places tonight, and they'll promise you to have a new experience, but very few will promise you to have a new attitude and outlook. That's a massive change. That's like getting to the source code. And AA says that you'll have a new attitude and a new outlook. You'll have a new freedom and a new happiness. It doesn't say you'll have a better freedom and no, it has nothing to do with quantity. It's a totally different shift. Yeah. And so you realize, see, why I want to get out of self is I believe I'm in self. If you see that, if you don't believe you're in self, you won't try to get out of self, and that's being out of self. Literally. That's what it is, And so now it gets stabilized. And then when you read that statement in the book, which is, to me, the unspoken step of AA, which is quit playing God. Yeah, because it says the 12 steps are a linear process, yeah? And the third step is a very important step. But before the third step, it says first you got to quit playing God, then next is the third step. So the first one is quit playing God. Now, what happens, because this is what selfing does, when you wake up in the morning, does it tell you how the day's going to be? That's playing God. Does it tell you how you are, how you're going to be? That's playing God. So the selfing is playing God. So if the selfing claims to be the one that's hearing the message, you got to quit playing God, then suddenly we're in another conundrum. Because then suddenly that which is playing God tries to stop playing God, which is playing God. And it can never, so as soon as self gets into it, there's no getting out of it. Yeah, self can't get out of self. So therefore, the quit playing God goes, all right, I'm going to quit playing God, but then it goes ad infinitum. So it's never, you're not going to get out. The thing is, have you ever really been in? That's where the solution lies. Because the solution is inherent before the problem. The solution, from the solution's point of view, the problem is an activity that the solution is entertaining, basically. Yes? Like we say in AA, I don't know if you use it here, but an acronym for fear, false evidence appearing real. If you look at that, what would be necessary for false evidence to appear real? It must be appearing real to what's real. Yeah? Why would you be bothered by false evidence appearing real? You'd be very clear it's false evidence. But if false evidence appears real to what's real, it's got some oomph. And isn't that what's happening with us? In our head, there's tons of false evidence being presented as real. And if we buy it, it's as if it's so. I've seen people whole day get fucked by one thought. One thought ruined their whole Hawaiian vacation. How could that be? How could a thought that's driving you crazy right now, and we're in close proximity, but it's not driving me crazy, but the same thought that's driving her crazy, if I held it as my thought, it would have the ability to drive me crazy. It's not the thought. It's the idea of being the thinker. That's the bondage. The bondage of self is that self-claim, the idea of selfing claims all the faculties, all the activities, and uses them to imply that it's me. I'm the thinker, I'm the feeler, I'm the taster, I'm the doer, I'm the seer, I'm the hearer. And it's just not true. You and I are an afterthought. Conscious contact is what's happening. Consciousness and contact. There's seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, touching. And then there's a thought about the seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, touching that implies there was a seer and a seen. That's what happens. And then we start at the end. You gotta, if you see it, it goes a long way. If you see it, the main movement of selfing or the disease of alcoholism is the claim. It claims a life that you have and calls it its life, yeah? And how does it do it? It claims it by claiming every thought that goes through the head is held as either your thought or a thought about you, basically, yeah? Every feeling, all day, tons of feelings are moving through this action figure. The mental state will say there's only one feeler, it's me. All these feelings that have happened have been used to imply, to insinuate, to reinforce that there's a me that's feeling. Yeah? All the thoughts are being used to, by the idea of being the thinker, are being used to reinforce the idea that you're the thinker of what. Look at the language. Look at it. Yeah. I did a talk a couple of years ago in New York. I hadn't been there in a while. So somebody who knows me came in and goes, "Oh, Paul, you're growing your hair, I said, "Yeah, I'm growing my hair and I'm doing a really good job, it's nice and long." And he's balding, so I say, "You're not doing well with the job, yeah?" He says, "I joined a group and we get together and we grow our hair together and it seems to work. Because you should join us. Come Saturday. It's 2 hours a week and I guarantee you'll have some hair." And I have pride about it. Look at this. It's gorgeous, I have a nice autographed little comb. But the fact is, all I do is not cut it. I have really nothing to do with growing the hair. But the language implies I do. Or I'm in the water surfing a couple years ago, and the knee went out. When I came back and told thousands of people what happened to me, I hurt my knee. So it sounded like I went out in the water with a hammer and fucking hit it, and I hurt my knee. But I didn't hurt my knee. My knee went out, basically. But the language implies you have a lot to do with shit you have nothing to do with. And you're listening to it religiously all freaking day. It's like living with a hypnotist. And every time the foreign installment enters any topic of your life, when you, which is awareness, is there, what it does is, as soon as it sees the self, it calls it me. It's got total carte blanche access to everything. Your most secret secrets, it knows. Because every time it enters into your world, you call it you. If you see it as something other than you, the possibility of being free from it is available. If you keep looking from it, man, you're going to need a lot of solutions. The problem eats solutions. It loves solutions in time. Yeah? It loves to be working 50 years to become a knower of God. The emphasis is never on God, it's always on you for 50 years. And you're playing God in the search of looking for God. Look at it, you get introduced to meditation, great little effort, but now if you miss the morning meditation, your whole day seems to be ruined. You got to go home at lunch and sit down and do it. You're being bound by your pursuit of a solution. We have it. I go to different groups and, there's this word awakening, and man, people would have been so much better off they never heard of it, yeah? Because they're driving themselves freaking crazy. Am I awake? Was I awake? Then I lost the awakening. It goes unbelievable. And then enlightenment, which means the cessation of all suffering, when claimed by the mental state, causes suffering. People are so pissed off that someone else is enlightened other than they are. I went to more meetings than that motherfucker. I cannot believe he's enlightened. It's like there's no one to be enlightened. None. We're already inherently awake. We can seem to know that to be. I dig this so much. Look at one of the forwards of AA. I get jacked up with this because I'm so tired of hearing the mundane possibilities like, I will be okay. If I just do this and do that, somehow something will get better. Bullshit. The solution is of a timeless nature. It's always available at all times right where we are, with no requirement necessary. You do not need to access it. You have never left it. That's the story of the mental state. The story of the mental state says you're disconnected. Or you're not here. I'm telling you, those books, there's probably some up there about, there'll be books, How to Get into the Moment. And they give you these techniques. And then the second book would be How to Really Get into the Moment. And then the third one would be How to Really, Really Get into the Moment. No one ever reads the whole fucking book. You know what I mean? But it's all predicated on the insane idea that you could be out of a moment. We have never been out of a moment that we've been in, ever. 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 And the whole same thing with the self. We're so much trying to get out of self, but we're never actually been in self. We're entertaining that we're a self, but we can never be a self because we're something prior to that. You cannot lose what you are through identification. You can just seemingly forget it. That's all. But there's no loss. I've had these opportunities. I've had downloads, like big free samples. And what happens when it downloads, it tells you it's always been this way. In other words, nothing that you believed had separated you was ever true. Nothing that you believed had the power to take you away from the truth was ever true. Nothing. It's like being a huge sky, allowing tons of shit to appear in it, yet it's not affected by anything that appears in it. All the heinous things I ever did as this has not left one mark on what I am. Not one. We're prior to being needed to be forgiven. Yeah. So in one of the forwards in the big book, it says, we are 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. A lot of speakers drop the seemingly, but the seemingly is the most important thing because it is a disease of perception. Seemingly means it appears to be true or false to us. Yeah, when I was drinking, yeah, and it was appearing to be true that it was hopeless, I was gonna fucking have another drink. Because who wouldn't? If you thought that nothing was ever gonna change, you'd want to forget that motherfucking moment, yeah? And so I'm gonna get loaded. But when the possibility of recovery was made available, I saw that it was a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. It was appearing to me to be hopeless. It is not a hopeless state of mind and body. I am prior to it. I am the arbiter, not as Paul, but as mind or as spirit. I am the arbiter. I am what gives everything all the meaning it has. I am what makes things that aren't so seem to be so. We are reality right now. The same thing looking right out of you, or the same no thing is looking out of here. There's no freaking difference. And there's no distance. Yeah. Well, wouldn't you like a little of that into your life as an action figure? You're not getting out of this. No fucking way. You're not. You're not going to transcend. I'm telling you, I've tried. I have. I've tried with a lot of vehicles. And the one vehicle I can guarantee I gave it the best I could possibly give it is drug addiction. Mm-hmm. Yeah? I could find fault in my spiritual practices. No, I didn't meditate 24 hours every day. Mm-hmm. I left the guru 5 minutes early. I didn't walk around that statue enough. I didn't stay in the cave long enough. Yes, you could look and critique my practice. But in my drug addiction, I was 100% a perfect drug addict. And I would compare my devotion to cocaine with any spiritual devotee in the annals of spirituality. I gave everything to it. I loved it. It was my religion. I'd fucking get anything I could get from you and give it to it. When I tried to break away from it, I couldn't leave it. My whole life was empty without it. I mean, I gave it completely 100%. And you cannot transcend an imaginary place. You cannot get out of here as this. And I feel most people, that's all they're being driven by, is an urge to escape themselves, as themselves. We want to be there to get it. We want to have an experience of our own absence, and it's not available. And now I found the greatest way. I've been trying to get out of here since I was 5 years old, 6 years old, swear to God. And now I found the answer to me is being completely here. I've given up all hopes of getting out of here. I see most spirituality as totally bogus. Totally bogus that's being presented here. It's just like another addiction. What's scarier, though, with spirituality is I do a lot of talks. They don't have interventions. Somebody should come up to them and go, that's enough, get out, put the TV down, no more meditation. But no, in spirituality, it goes on and on and on. At least we're so flamboyant, someone puts a stop to us occasionally. Them, they're just sucking them dry of money. People are going on 35 retreats. I'm telling you, if 34 retreats haven't done it, the 35th ain't going to do it. Something's wrong. You cannot find what you are. You cannot experience what you are. You cannot have what you are. The only possibility that's available to us is being what we are. And we are doing that right now. With no thought or effort. It doesn't sweat being spirit. Yeah? Consciousness, I was seeing on the worst day of my life, I was seeing on the best day of my life. If I was looking this way and my eyes were open, I was going to see whatever was there. No matter if I didn't want to see it, I saw it. There's no volition in seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, touching. What I sense in the pause we talk about in AA is me. That's what I am. I am the pause. I am that which is prior to thought. You can rest there because you've never moved. So what occurred is that, so there I was doing 4-step workshops. People kept coming with pens and papers, and they started to realize, hey, he's not fucking talking about the 4-step anymore at all. And it morphed into what's happening now. Because I found, I don't know, I wouldn't say, this has come to be the last answer in this, for me, in this life. which is a damn good answer because it negated any need for any more answers concerning this topic. I never waste 1 second looking for what can't be found, ever. Yeah. I'm not trying to find what I am from what I'm not. I just see what I'm not, and that's what I am. Yeah? So when I started to see this idea of me that wasn't so, as not being so, I haven't had an urge to drink or use for 30 years almost. Never, not even an energy at all in it. When I got struck sober almost 30 years ago, and you know, here, that's the greatest solution I ever had, because if I had an urge, I'd probably get loaded again, but I've never had an urge since. It's an incredible solution. I've never had a strong thought about getting loaded. That was mind-boggling demonstration of a power greater than self in my life. What am I going to do? I'm going to follow that thing. Hey, you're going to find that God can do for what you can't do for yourself. I'm going to expand on what I cannot do for myself. I'm just going to let it go, because I am not managerial quality. I cannot be. My life led by this leads me to having to be managed by other people. I have to be supervised. I do. I spent 2 years in one program, Delancey Street, and I spent 3 months in a program when I was younger in the Bronx. I spent a lot of nights in like 3 or 4 day stints in jails. And the alcoholic of my type was I was willing to pay any consequence tomorrow not to feel uncomfortable now. And with active alcoholism, I'm uncomfortable. And I'm apt to do almost anything, and I have. Yeah. But see, that irritable, restless, and discontent has switched to an ease and comfort. Yeah. Of course there's anxiety, but it's not my anxiety. Yeah. If I thought I was giving these talks, I wouldn't have shown up. Seriously. I've shown up to thousands of talks, but thank God, because I never showed up for any of them. Because I knew it once I was doing those workshops. I'm a real believer that I don't believe that statement that you have to have it to give it away. I believe if you're willing to give it away, you'll have it. Because that's been my experience. I sat there and something wanted to be of help, and it used this, and I feel the experience was like there was water, an infinite source of water, and this was the hose. And the funny thing is, as the water kept coming through, I realized it didn't give a shit about the hose's condition. It didn't give a shit about if the hose was feeling good or wasn't. If the hose was willing, the water came through. And thousands of Monday nights convinced me of a lot of stuff, because I would come into these talks and a lot of pressing issues may be on my mind. I may be physically ill. Back when I first came in, when you went for an AIDS test, it was a 3-week wait. You didn't get the results. So I had 3 weeks of could have been total mind fucking, because I had a lot of evidence that I probably have AIDS. Yeah. So all this stuff, my fairy princess left me 5 minutes before the meeting, but I'd sit my ass down there, and all those conditions were totally removed as if they had never even been there for that hour. And after that happening hundreds and hundreds of times, I realized, how real can this shit be if it can disappear so quickly? Yeah? If this attention leaves that doesn't seem to even exist. Yeah, so this just extended into the obviousness of non-duality, because if you're not a long-lasting, independent, separate entity, what are you? The sense of being a self is the whole pivot of duality. The whole pivot of duality is seeing gets turned into seer and seen. Hearing gets turned into hearer and heard. That's all. What happens is life is claimed, and then you get an interpretation back. You're the star, which is what causes us to stay in the movie theater, because the movie sucks pretty much, but we're totally enraptured because it's about us. It's just like Narcissus with the pond. We're just immersed in our reflection. Yeah. But I saw it when I was young. Life was happening, and then it suddenly turned into life's happening to me. And ever since then, like, I saw the day almost when I used to just do actions as a baby and a kid up to about 4. And then one day I did something and I thought about it, and I never did anything ever again without accompanied by thought. And what happened is life was gone, and I had an interpretation about life according to, happening to me. And I wanted out. But I was defined by self can't get out of self. I was trying to get out of what I wanted to get out of as what I wanted to get out of. Fuck. It's a rude joke, man. But if you let it hit you, there's a big opening. And then you can really get on with it, You can be really of service to people. Because if you're present, that makes you available. And if you're present and available, you're of service. Which is totally different than doing service. Being of service is like a whole different, it's like where an activity turns into a state, Just like when your attitude gets infused with gratitude. I don't have tons of experiences of being grateful because I have an attitude of gratitude, So, yes. So we'll open up to questions.
Yeah.
Is that all right? Everyone? Okay. Yeah. You can feel it in the room, yes? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's the whole message. The whole message is an energetic imprint, really. You all been served the spiritual subpoena already. You are what you're looking for. There's some great Zen cryptic or spiritual cryptic statements that make total sense when the act of being identified is seen through, which is, there's a great master called Huang Po, a Zen master, who would say, whatever can be perceived cannot be perceiving. So I'm seeing, quote, you, so therefore you're not what's perceiving. And you're seeing this, therefore this isn't what's perceiving. The spirit is perceiving, yes? And then Huang Po goes, you know what? You can't use the Buddha to seek the Buddha. You can't use light to seek light. You can't use the big M mind, awareness, let's call it, to seek mind. You can do it for eons and nothing's going to happen. Now, why would he say that to Paul, Mary, Jim, Steve, unless Huang Po saw Paul, Mary, Jim, Steve as the Buddha? So you think you're Steve or Mary, but Huang Po sees you as the Buddha, and he's not talking to Steve or Mary because he knows it doesn't go anywhere. He talks to the Buddha. So he goes, Buddha, you can't use yourself to find yourself. It doesn't take the Buddha 30 years to get that. The Buddha nature of mind gets it. It's already it knows before knowing. It just, in this place of time, it needs a reminder. And that's what this message is. You are what you're looking for. But like we talk at a lot of the talks now, because I've done these thousands of these, there's no point about talking to you about the Buddha. It doesn't go anywhere. But talking to the Buddha about you goes somewhere. Because the Buddha will go, hey, maybe I'm not that. Yeah? But when you hear it, then it just doesn't go anywhere. Yes? Because you'll make the Buddha what you're going to make the Buddha to fit you. Yeah. So these are little warnings. So there you have it. If you have a question, fine. I'm not an authority. I'm just sharing. I would have been a circuit speaker if this hadn't happened. It ruined my career. It really has.
Share something?
Yeah.
I'm Adam. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Adam. How are you?
So today I was listening to a gentleman share a story about, I don't know, it was like, turned out to be a story about a conversation between some guy and the Buddha, right? And it was like, how many problems, this guy had a lot of problems. The number is 83, but I don't think it matters. It's just so that you can give one more problem, right? So he's like, I got all these problems, like 83 different problems. He had a list of them, and it was all, and I need solutions for all these problems. And the Buddha's like, hey, I don't think my teaching can help you find solutions for all these problems. you'll just have another problem that needs another solution. And the guy's like, well, what good are your teachings then? You know, what's the value of all this that you know? And he says, well, I think my teachings can help you with the 84th problem, which is you don't want any problems.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Well, it's like in AA we say you have to fit yourself around circumstances instead of trying to fit them around you. Yes. Because really, it's the biggest problem is the one who has the problems. Yes. It's the identification by the mental state will claim problems to imply you're the one who has the problems. Yes. If you want to see anything of the activity of the mental state, the robbery, right, in process is claiming. So thoughts, it's sort of like here. You see this bottle. Everyone sees the bottle. I'm going to change its intent, right? Now you call it my bottle, and what is it doing? It's implying there's someone who owns or has this bottle. Same thing with thoughts. It's happening all day. There's thoughts going by, yeah? But this way, the mental state claims the thoughts and puts a tail on them called my thoughts. And now each thought is implying the thinker. The thinker is a thought, yeah? So the thoughts are being used to imply that there's a thinker of all these thoughts. There isn't a thinker of the thoughts. There isn't a doer of the actions. There isn't a hearer of the hearing. There's just hearing, seeing, feeling, tasting, touching. There is no one. That's the essence of non-duality. There is no one having an experience. And therefore you cannot have an experience of what you are because there's a problem there. You are it. Yeah? You'd have to be something else to experience what you are. So people call experiences, it's not an experience. This is beyond all that. It's being. It's a simple inherent condition you're in right now. And all the yapping and all the this and all of that hasn't changed it one bit. And yet, no one goes to seeing classes. They're not getting on a workout and seeing, hearing, yes? Because it's being what it is, which is conscious. There's no thought or effort in it, yes? But what happens is then we believe, from the mental point of view, that we can use thought and effort to arrive at that which demonstrates no thought and effort. It's insanity. It's all misdirection. So your spiritual journey is more about you than anything else. This is an invitation. It doesn't matter if you like it or not. You've heard it now. Mind has heard it. And if you're keen on it, you'll probably run into some more stuff like this, yeah? And then the invitation will become obvious, and then coincidences will occur. And like they say in this great book, The Course in Miracles, you and I are the dreaming of this dreaming, and we're going to dream ourselves out of the dream. And as we do, the dream will get happier. And I'd have to say that's been my recovery life. So, yeah.
In one of your talks, you talked about getting run over by the car.
Yes.
And how it didn't stop that.
No. I got run over twice and it didn't stop it. The same night. No. I don't believe surrender is based on circumstances. It wasn't for me. The day it happened with me was a regular day at the office. I was just trying to stay loaded until I could get high. And I had that huge impediment that got me so pissed off the last few months, which was I didn't have any money. So my whole job was trying to convince someone else to get what I wanted. And my average of doing that was getting bad. I wasn't being successful too much, and I was fucking pissed. I had $35,000 of coke, and then I had none, and I never could go back to quarter-gram shots. It was fucking hell. I was so pissed off. But Where was I? Oh, about the thing. It was a regular day at the office. I was just really trying to stay loaded till I could get high. And then what happened is I was in a trailer park with a guy I didn't know. I had gone out 4 days before in San Francisco, and he ended up in about 2 hours north. I didn't know how it came about, but I was in this trailer park with this guy, and we were drinking a bottle of Royal Gate vodka, a very cheap kind of, like 80 cents a pint. And I looked at him, and he had a big head and a bulbous nose and varicose veins, and I said to myself, this guy's a bum, But lo and behold, I saw him looking at me like I was a bum. And what happened was something like a portal opened up, and it was like a download, really. Something came in, and I like the statement in the book. I don't believe admitting to myself ever worked. It was when there was an admittance to my innermost self. That's when I was getting convinced. So what happened is this download came in, and it was like a CNN news flash, no story, just a headline, and it was, I'm fucked, which had been my condition, but it was like news to me, really. It was. It was like almost like I was surprised, like it came upon me. I'd been in the condition for months, but and then so suddenly it motivated different behavior. I went out to a phone booth, called Delancey Street, asked them if they'd take me back, that program I'd been in, 2-year program. I'd gone out, graduated with flying colors. In a week, I was loaded again. Went on a 10-month run, ended up washed up in this trailer. I called them. They'd been getting my newsletter, and they said, no, you can't come back. You can come back in a month and have another interview. Doesn't mean you're going to get in. And I said the first honest thing I'd said in 10 months, which is, I don't think I have a month, I could feel like terminalness. And that set off a train of circumstances that brought me great fortune, because I called up a woman I used to go out with and party with, and I convinced her to come pick me up, hour and a half drive. In that hour and a half drive, I had a miraculous alcoholic recovery. I wanted to get loaded again. Forgot about the fucking moment of clarity. So I got in the car and I'm talking to her, and I want to buy a 6-pack of talls, get the dirty magazines, get the Coke, rent the hotel room. She had followed that equation many times with me, hadn't been that satisfying for her. So she said, no, we're not doing that tonight. And she said, do you want a place to stay tonight? And that's all I really wanted. I said, yeah. She says, you got to go to an AA meeting. So she took me to my first meeting, a men's meeting, dropped me off and picked me up afterward. And I've been sober and clean ever since. So AA was the way that which happened was set. AA was the way it was going to express through. I mean, I got the sobriety downloaded, and then it suddenly met AA, and AA was going to be the way it was going to express for the next 30 years. Yeah. Like, if I had anything to say to new people, I would say, pray for the ability to be convinced and be fucking done with it. Stop thinking you're going to manage yourself out of what you can't manage yourself out of. Yeah, that's what happened with me. That I'm fucked has never changed for 30 years. There's not like a 12-year review or a debate after 14 years. Nope, it was as clear as that moment it downloaded, because I had never felt so much convincing in such a minute, like in a nanosecond. I was done with that. Yeah. It was just how to learn how to live life sober, and that's the way what AA does. Yeah, because you're here in time. It's easy to get sober. It's hard to stay sober. You need a way of life. Maybe you don't. I need a way of life. I need a way of life. I need a new way to live out here. Or I'm going to veer off and run into something, mostly authorities, and go to jail. Yeah. So, and then it's given me all this room to entertain other possibilities. Yeah. To know peace and to understand serenity. All that stuff. It's amazing. And there's no end to it, really. Possibilities are endless. We're the ones that we define everything. If you can, see, I like this idea. See, you enter AA and they say you have a higher power of your own understanding. But over time, it turned into, I have turned my will and life over to the care of a higher power of its own understanding. I don't want a higher power of my understanding. It's going to be quite limited and small. Maybe you'll get a date or a parking space at the meeting or something. I want to find out what the higher power understands of itself. That's been revelatory. Yeah, really. Because it will just, first you'll come up against a lot of old ideas, and it will keep putting you up them until you start taking, the invitation. Yeah? And just because love is gonna drag it out of you. It's just gonna pull it out of you. I like looking at AA as you're on an operating table, you just don't get up, you don't play doctor, and everything goes fucking pretty good. Yeah? And that's how it is for me. And I don't believe we come in here to change. I believe we submit to being changed. Yeah? You've realized you're not managerial quality, and you submit to a process that will change this action figure and maybe make it a better hose, so to speak, to the point where the hose can actually sense the water and move from being the hose or being identified as hose and realize it is the water. Yeah? Yeah. So.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'd just like to hear your perspective on it. And when you're in that place, right, and you feel the water and all those thoughts, self-seeking fears, whatever they were, suddenly like, oh shit, they don't even exist anymore. And then you're kind of just seeing the truth of what you really are. But then you kind of go back to that place where you're like, oh, you know what I mean? And now you're being pulled by the self.
Yes.
We're listening to one ear. I was listening to one ear talking, and Paul starts pawing again.
Yes.
What do you do when you start once you're aware, you're like, oh, well, that's what this is. I'm in the self again, or the self is taking over. What do you do?
Well, for me, I look at that a little differently because, see, there's the pawing, let's say, and then then a paw is implied, and then suddenly the paw that's implied thinks it's doing the pawing. I usually see that, so that doesn't, yes. But if it seemed like it caught me, I would do service. Service is the tried and true method to break through that orbit. Yeah, not with maybe family members, but with people. Go out, because the service will pull out the attention and interest from that orbit. Yeah, and open up a little thing, and you'll feel available, and again you'll feel like you're out of self, with the hopes that while you're out of self, maybe you entertain the impossibility of being in self. I hope so. Yeah? Yeah. So I would say service is the easiest way. But see, I don't see when the pawing is happening, I don't believe I'm doing it. Yeah. It doesn't mean it doesn't upset the action figure, but there's a spaciousness that I know I'm not doing it, yes? Mm-hmm. This is what happens with the selfing. The selfing does a trick in time. See, we believe there's time is here and it moves to a future, yes? And it's like linear, yeah? But the mental state knows it isn't. Time is subjective. We're dreaming it, yeah? So like when you're at work, it seems to go really slow. When you're doing something you like, it seems to go really fast. There's something that's being implied there. It's based more on your condition than time's condition. Yes? Obviously. I mean, just look at it. You're at the root of it all. Yeah? So the selfing, this claiming, what it does is, because I've seen it. Yeah? I've seen it. Because you're before it. Your awareness. You're not the thing that's said to be you after the thought. You're before thoughts. Yeah? So the selfing goes like this. It uses thoughts to imply you're the thinker. So then the selfing produces the thinker, right? So let's say the selfing is happening, and then there's the feeling of being Paul. Yeah? But as soon as the feeling of being a Paul arises here, it's implied to be before, and now you look at the act of selfing as you did it. See? But the selfing with mind complying produces the sense of self, but as soon as the sense of self is there, it says it's the one that was doing the selfing. I get it all the time. People call me when they get this information, they go, I've been selfing all day. I go, that's not selfing. Selfing is the feeling of being the one who's been selfing all day. Or the selfing is driving me crazy. That's not selfing. The one that's being driven, that sense of being the one that's being driven crazy, that's the product of selfing, the sense of being the one. It's the sense of being the one. That's the root of duality. And non-duality is just a negation of that. There is no one. There is no seer, there's seeing. There is no hearer, there's hearing. Yeah? It's everything is verbing. There's no entrance, there's no exit, you're never in, you can never get out. It's just happening. Like life is happening at all times, but in a sense nothing ever happened. Yeah, they're proving it now. They say now, when you remember something, all you remember is a memory of it. You know, it's all, I don't want to get too out there, but to me it's all dreaming completely. This is dreaming. We're in the act of dreaming right now. Yeah? Yeah.
You want a water?
I have water. Now, this talk's always bring me back to life. I wasn't feeling well, but physically, but I'm feeling well now. Yeah, it's such a powerful thing for me, because I'd have to pay to get it affirmed somewhere else. I'm just going to be my own affirmation of it. I can't wait for other people to talk to me about it. I got to just be the one who talks. I've gone to more meetings than anyone else in this room of Paul Hedderman. I've been at every Paul Hedderman meeting that ever happened. I mean, I'm a really bad case. I've got to hear it constantly. Because don't you get sick of the fucking solutions based on time? I will be okay. I was once okay. What about inherent okayness? What's wrong with that? Yeah? What about, why aren't you what you're looking for? You seem to be looking for tons of shit. Why aren't you what you're looking for? You're the most valuable commodity here, awareness. Why aren't you that valuable to you? I wouldn't come here if this wasn't this. I'm a junkie, man. Things are practical to me. Yeah, I want to feel something. This has caused a lightness in my life that's stabilized. And after a while of traveling lighter, you just go, what more do you want? What more do you want but to travel lighter through every day? Just like that heaviness skimmed off the top a little bit. Yeah? So you're not so far up your ass that you need to find a divine proctologist, you know? You can be available to other people and then meet love with love, you know? Not meet love with fucking, you know, fear, but meet love with love. When love is offered to me, I can meet it with love. Yeah. These things, I was incapable of having a viable relationship with other people, like it says in the book. All of that. I think with that terminal uniqueness was so freaking thick. When I came in, no one thinks like me. We all fucking think the same. That's the beauty. I don't identify with you. I identify with what's taking you over. I know what it's like to live under the tyranny of alcoholism and addiction. So when you share what your life is like, it sure sounds like my life, because it wasn't your life or my life. It's our life, captured by a fucking parasite. And the Fords get together and we talk about it with the hopes that you realize, I'm a Ford and you're a Ford, and it leads to, but therefore we're not. Yes? You see it in AA meetings all the time. People, oh, I'm amazed how everyone thinks just like I do and feels just like I do and does the same thing I do. And I'm going, yes, what does that imply? If all of you have my thoughts, they can't be my thoughts. My implies ownership, not a public source. Yeah? The whole point of all our meetings is see the commonality of it. To see what I'm calling my thoughts aren't my thoughts. They could be better defined as alcoholic thoughts. Yeah? And all the feelings I thought I'm the only one to have, you've had them. And all the actions I thought no one did what I've done, while you have. What's that? Why do we share? Not to make it all about us, but to see we're not us in a sense. To see that what we're taking ourselves to be, you're taking yourself to be. A self. And we're not that unique. It's like a stock version. But yet it fools us so completely, it never has to fucking re-up. It's got the same tapes from 40 years ago, or for some younger. Yeah? I'm a loser, I'm never going to be loved. Blah, 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 blah. Fuck, it never even has to upgrade, because we just soak it all up. I mean, we believe it completely like that. You're a loser. Oh, Jesus Christ. Then you don't want to feel like a fraud. When you don't want to feel like a fraud, you feel like one all fucking day. It's insane. It's slavery. Complete slavery. And it places you where? In what's not happening. All day. No animal other than us thinks about next Wednesday. None. Dogs aren't thinking, when am I going to go to the beach again? They're not fucking thinking that. We're the only ones that get occupied by what's not happening. That's why we admire when we see dogs and dolphins and shit. Because they seem to be very easily and freely present. For us, it's like a yeoman's job. Because we're basically taking ourselves to be something that's actually not so. And therefore, we're prone to live in what's not happening, because that's where we appear the most. That's where you can be thought about quite a lot in yesterday and tomorrow. So the thought system thinks now about yesterday and tomorrow. And most people, if you're fucked up tonight, it's not usually about tonight. It's about last week or next week. How are you going to... I had this little joke with my groups. I say I'm a psychiatrist. My specialty is going to be what's not happening. So I have an office. I only have it for one day. I'm going to retire after this one day. I book about 60 appointments. Yeah. So Bill Smith comes, and he's got his hour-long session. Bill Smith comes in, starts bitching about what's not happening. I go, Bill, that's not happening. See you next week. There goes Bill. Took me 30 seconds. Next person come in, I can retire at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. I've seen enough people at $200 a clip. I'm finished. But really, what do you do? What's the solution to what's not happening? Seeing it as not happening.
That's your tangible work right there? Or just
No, I'm just joking about it. But it is a tangible work, because it's funny, because the only way what's not happening can seem to be happening, it has to be entertained by what's happening. Yeah? Isn't it? It's us. We are what's happening. Not as this, but as what we are. We're the only one that can make something out of nothing. If we believe next Wednesday is going to be fucking terrible, it can produce an effect now in us. What's that but a miracle worker? Look at like Jesus, his main cred was raising a guy from the dead, Lazarus, right? It's one of his big miracles. He raised someone from the dead. But Lazarus had been alive at one time. We're making shit out of nothing all fucking day, aren't we? The elbow ain't. It's the thought system. As in AA, it says the problem resides in the mind. See the exact nature of the wrong. The thought system is presenting life based on a self. It's called self-centeredness. The whole system is centered on you as being the center of it. That's the root of the problem. And the problem cannot get out of the problem. So you see it as not you, and that's the freedom from it. If you see it as you, you're looking to become free. If you see it not as you, you are free. Yeah. Yes. I'm tired now.
That was good.
All right.
Anybody?
Any questions? We have shirts and books. We have books. I don't know how many I have on the AA, but we have books on AA called Under Arrest, and then the other one's a non-linear book called Escape from Everywhere, which is very hard to do. Oh, here they are. There's one there.
I got one here.
Oh, there's Escape
There's
from
some in
Everywhere.
there.
And we have T-shirts. So because basically, if you come to these meetings, you're going to get nothing. So you can get a shirt, which is something. But these meetings, really, in AA you can be helpful, but in non-duality there's no need for help. It's just a fact. Yeah. Non-duality is not going to help you. It isn't. Yeah. So, all right.
Sean, grab that basket, would you? There's a basket under, right?
Oh,
behind
yes.
you. Under and pass that basket if you would.
Oh, yes, it's